All right. Welcome to the African Alumni Association. We are going to be starting momentarily. Thank you so much for joining us. Before we start, I'm going to ask Catherine Bate to join us and recite the land acknowledgement. We do have all our panelists in the room. So we are going to be starting in a minute. Catherine, can you recite the land acknowledgement?
Yeah, for sure. We wish to acknowledge this land on which the University of Toronto African Alumni Association operates. For thousands of years, it has been the traditional land of Huron-Wendat, the Seneca, and most recently, the Mississaugas of the Credit River. Today, this meeting place is still the home to many Indigenous people from across Turtle Island, and we are grateful to have the opportunity to work on this land.
Thank you so much.
Back to you, Henry.
Thank you so much, Catherine. All right. Yeah, so at the University of Toronto, we think it is important to acknowledge the land that we work on. So that's why we always start with our land acknowledgement. With me today, we have two panelists, both scientists who are going to educate us on some of the myths that are going on and to perhaps give us some courage to have some trust in the vaccination, the coronavirus vaccination. So I'm gonna let each one of them come on. We do have Patricia Sebaza in Toronto, and we do have Dr. Daniel Kawama from DC. Just gonna give you a little bit of preamble of this conversation before we begin. So according to Farid Zakaria, the novel coronavirus could cause the greatest economic, political, and social damage to humankind since World War II. In his recent publication, 10 Lessons for Post-Pandemic World, Zakaria suggests that how we respond will determine the magnitude of the diverse effects we encounter in the post-pandemic world. So are we going to respond with fear? Are we going to respond with denial? Or are we going to respond with adaptation? With me here today to discuss whether the COVID-19 vaccine hesitancy is justifiable are two distinguished scientists, one located in Washington, DC, and the other located in Toronto, Ontario. Patricia Sebaza is a pharmacist and lecturer at the University of Toronto, while Daniel Kawama is a senior pharmacist at Walmart, and he's located in DC. I am going to give them an opportunity to formally introduce themselves. So why don't I start with the lady?
Hi everyone. Henry, just a little bit of correction. I am not a lecturer at U of T, but I have worked as a clinical instructor for their MTM4 program. So I've done that for a few years. But yeah, hi everyone, happy Tuesday. My name is Patricia Sebaza, as Henry just mentioned. I am a pharmacist, and just a little bit of background about myself. I completed most of my education out east in Nova Scotia, and that's where I took my pharmacy degree. And upon graduation, I worked in Nova Scotia for a couple of years as a relief pharmacist before relocating or moving to Ontario. So I am currently a practicing pharmacist in Ontario, and I have been practicing for a little over 10 years in Ontario. I've worked in various capacities. I've worked as a staff pharmacist. I've worked as a relief pharmacist where I covered shifts anywhere from the Niagara region to Ottawa and any place in between. And I've also worked as a pharmacy manager. In my current role as a pharmacist, I am a continuing care consultant pharmacist, and our location deals primarily with long-term care facilities. So we deal with nursing homes, retirement homes, and group homes. I'm passionate about health and wellness and volunteering locally or overseas on medical missions. And I look forward to being part of this engaging conversation.
Thank you. Thank you so much for joining us today. We are very excited to have you. Next in line, who is Dr. Kawama?
Thanks for having me. My name is Daniel Kawama. I'm based here in the Washington, D.C. Area. I've also been a pharmacist for about 10 years right now. I worked in retail pharmacy, but I also do some work with students at Longterm School of Pharmacy and Marshall University School of Pharmacy. I did my pharmacy program at the University of Minnesota and also did a biochem degree with at Macalester College in St. Paul, Minnesota. I also do work, though initially my interest was in research and drug design, but I got passion in clinical pharmacy, and I do work with a lot of patients on a daily basis in my practice. I'm also a pharmacy manager for, as you mentioned earlier, for Walmart Pharmacy. So I'm happy to be here today because we are all going through the effects of COVID-19 in our practice and in our daily lives. So thanks for having us on this panel today, and I look forward to having an engaging discussion. Thank you.
We are very excited to have you, Dr. Kawama, and Patricia. Of course, this is an opportunity for you to educate us, because some of us are very nervous what is going on. But before we delve into the tougher questions, why don't you tell us how you're doing? How has the pandemic treated you? How do you feel? And what do we need to know about the various medications that are available today? Patricia, you want to take the lead?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, like everyone else, we're all in the same boat right now. Things are locked down, open up, they lock down again. Like in Ontario, we've been back and forth ever since March. And actually, I live in Toronto, so we're still currently in our stay-at-home order. But my workplace, we've still been going in physically ever since pre-pandemic, I guess. So we never stopped. But it is a tough time because there's a lot of people that have lost their lives. Some people have been hospitalized, people have lost jobs. So it's a tough time for a lot of people, and it's nerve-wracking, but at the end of the day, like, we will get through this. And yeah, with God's grace, I'm still here. So yeah.
Again, nice to have you. How about Dr. Kawama? How is he doing?
Yes, it's been tough, obviously. But as healthcare providers, this is what we prepare for. These moments are time for not just pharmacists and other healthcare providers, but all frontline workers in general. There are many people who have been able to step up and sacrifice because most of us cannot work from home. We have to be on the front lines taking care of patients. So yes, there is some extra anxiety because you have to be protective of yourself and your staff. You have to be careful when you're out of work to make sure you don't bring back COVID to your co-workers. So generally, but most of the companies we work for take great steps in making sure we have sufficient PPEs to make sure we work in an environment which is safe for us as staff members, but also safe for our patients. I don't want to be infecting my patients when they come into the pharmacy. So it's kind of a deliberate process every morning you come in, you have to answer some questions to make sure you haven't been exposed, to make sure you go through those steps of, have you been in contact with people who have been infected with COVID? So there's several steps you have to take every morning. You have to clean your work area to make sure it's clearly sanitized. You have to wear PPEs, protective gear and equipment in your place of work. Some of us are losing skin from using hand sanitizer. It doesn't work well with some of my hands look a little darker than they used to, mostly because of daily use of hand sanitizer. So those are things which we go through on the daily basis. But I mean, it's been a great challenge, but at the same time, it's an opportunity because we are here for the good of the people, to protect the community, to guide people, because healthcare is a very complicated process. And if you look at most of the vulnerable populations, usually it's the elderly, it's the minority communities who mostly don't have access to healthcare. So our job as healthcare providers is to make sure we streamline the process for them and offer as much guidance as possible in an environment where we are all discovering the process. It looks like every day you check on the CDC website, there are new guidelines, there are changes in treatment protocols, there are medications which people think used to work and now they don't work. So that kind of process, it's kind of everything is dynamic, and we have to be ready to make sure we gather the information and communicate it to our patients on a daily basis.
Gather the information and communicate it to our communities. I think that's fair. That's a fair comment. As Patricia said, here in Canada, we are still following the procedures given to us by the provincial and federal government. Of course, the federal government for Canadians, if you don't know, Dr. Kawama, we have been cautioned not to travel anywhere. If you do decide to travel, when you come back, you must quarantine in a government specified hotel, and they encourage you to have at least $2,000 budget for at least those 3 days you're going to quarantine in a hotel. So that's those are one of the things that we are following, and we are trying to learn more about as we go about these vaccinations. Of course, as you said, we're all in this together. But as we engage into this conversation, for now, we know a little bit of what is going on. We know for sure Morderna, Pfizer-Biontech, Oxford-Astrazeneca, these scientific words sometimes stop me a lot to pronounce, but all these corporations, and of course some others, have created some vaccines. The question for you today, the first question for you, the serious question for you today, as we engage in this conversation, especially knowing that one of you is from the US and the other one is from Canada. Now, the statistics are completely different. For example, in Canada, we have lost about 21,000 people to this pandemic. In the US, on the other hand, we are looking at over 500,000 people who have passed on due to this coronavirus. My question to you, and you could answer based on where you are located on your different contexts. Are we in the right place right now with the medications that have been supplied so far? Dr. Kawama, 500,000 people sounds a lot. Should we be worried?
Yes, the United States has been facing several challenges ever since the pandemic started, and that's where you have to. There are two sections to this question. There's the political aspect of it, the political leadership, and then you have the medical aspect of it. Now, I'll start with the political aspect of it, because that played a very crucial role in the United States. We just went through the great Donald Trump, the last 4 years of Donald Trump, and that really impacted the response to the pandemic. And we have seen very different leaders and different regions handle the pandemic in different ways. United States is known for its liberties and freedoms. People don't want to be mandated to do anything. And I think that's what usually that's the spirit which the former president took advantage of and said, you know, you don't have to wear a face mask. So they were making, the CDC was making guidelines on people like Dr. Fauci, but then Donald Trump comes out and says the opposite. So you had this politicization of the pandemic, and I think that played a crucial role in the numbers and the pandemic getting out of control very early in the United States. Because if you look at the way pandemic spread, it's exponential. If you fail to get control of it in a certain community, people travel and go into different states. Before you know it, you have lost control of the pandemic. And instead of playing mitigation, and you're now playing defense, and you're getting hospitals which are overwhelmed with people, the way we had the New York area, which was really, hospitals were flooding with sick people in the emergency room. So I believe in the United States, the political response took too long. By the time they woke up and started taking some measures, the pandemic had already spread throughout the country. And that played a really key role in why we have the current numbers today. On the medical aspect of it, I think the vaccine effort was very rapid, and that has really reaped results today, because we have had a vaccine produced in 12 months. That has never happened in human history. We have had no vaccine ever that has been, they sequenced the genome actually to the year today in around February of the COVID-19 vaccine. It was sequenced in China. And then when they made that genome available to companies like Morderna, like BioNTech, and others, they took advantage of that genome and they were able to start working on the vaccine using messenger RNA technology. So we have never seen that pace of vaccine creation. And that's why most of the vaccines you see on the market today are using new technology, which is genome-based technology of messenger RNA. If you look at most of the traditional vaccines we had for treating measles, tetanus, TB, diphtheria, most of those killer diseases, they use older technology where you get either a vaccine, you attenuate it, or you inactivate it, to use that language. That process takes a lot longer than the process they're using today of just using pretty much like a messenger RNA molecule, and you make the cell produce proteins which generate an antibody. So the process is a lot faster and efficient, and that's what enabled vaccines to be created in just a record pace of 12 months. So I think the medical side of things was exceptional. The political in the United States, the political and the leadership, at least is starting to improve now with Biden and his team. He's putting together a competent team of scientists to really run the public health response. I think they're doing a lot better than the previous leadership. For other countries, the numbers look a lot impressive. For Canada, and also even Europe, if you look at Europe, their numbers were a little bit better because they were able to mitigate and take concrete steps rapidly to avoid the spread of the pandemic. So yes, US, it was a disaster of a response, but I hope with the vaccine coming out, they'll be able to catch up and get control of the pandemic.
Thank you so much for that, for those insights. Patricia, what do you think? Is Canada doing well? Should we relax? Should we go back to work? Some of us have been working from home for over 15 months now. So I don't know what you think. Should we go back to work?
Well, I mean, given the climate that we still are learning more about the vaccines, even though they've been rolled out, and it's great that they've come out. Even with what Dr. Kawama just mentioned, that they came out so quickly and are using a newer technology. But we still need to exercise caution, and we really still need to maintain those public health measures, because right now, we can't say that 100% of the population is vaccinated. I think the only country right now that has a higher vaccine population is Israel, where I think they've surpassed about 50% of their population. So in order for us to get to that herd immunity that our public health agencies are encouraging, we need to get to at least 70% vaccinated, which we currently don't have in Canada. So I believe that what is being done is adequate, given the powers that be that are making these decisions. But we still need to maintain those public health measures, like the mask wearing, the staying home when you're sick, the distancing, social distancing and whatnot. I mean, everyone misses that contact and that social aspect of life that we haven't really had for some time. But when you look at the grand scheme of things, the benefits far outweigh I guess the inconveniences to our lives, right?
Right. The benefits outweigh the inconveniences to our lives. So then that takes me to a different dynamic at the moment. Have you taken the vaccine yourself? What is the science surrounding the efficiency of these vaccines that are available from the different corporations?
Yes, I have received my first dose of the Pfizer vaccine about a week ago. I was actually very nervous about it. Believe it or not. I've come through all the data, I've read all the studies, but I was just still a little nervous because this technology, this is the first product which has been approved through messenger RNA technology, which I was talking about. This technology has been around since 1995, and most of the researchers have been trying to use it to make cancer drugs and also embryonic cell research. That has always been the target of using messenger RNA. So this is, all those years, no product had been approved by FDA or any other body through messenger RNA technology. So the fact that they did it in 12 months is nerve-wracking. I mean, whether you believe in science or you're a doubter, it's important to actually take a deep breath and look at the data. And that's why I always encourage people to seek the counsel of their healthcare providers and other experts, and also, use reliable or credible sources to read about these vaccines. So I did receive my first dose. I had some mild side effects, but most of the side effects are expected with most of the other vaccines, because your body is trying to generate an immune response. You're introducing a foreign body in your bloodstream. So generally, while you're generating an immune response, you might have some chills, you might have some soreness at the area where they injected you. Some people might generate like muscle and body aches and that kind of thing. But so far the symptoms, mine were very mild for just a couple hours, and I'm going back for my second dose on March 5th. The vaccine I took, the Pfizer one, is 2 doses, 21 days in between the doses. The Morderna vaccine is 28 days between the doses. And Johnson & Johnson is coming up. The Johnson & Johnson vaccine, that one is a 1-dose vaccine series. So far, it's, I'm comfortable with the data. The efficacy looks impressive. If you look at most of the vaccines historically, we have never had vaccines which have 95% efficacy. Pfizer, they are saying they are 95%, Morderna 94%, and Johnson & Johnson AstraZeneca, they are in the low 70%. But even that is very impressive, because if you look at traditional vaccines, we get like the flu vaccine every day, the efficacy is 40 to 50% range. So this efficacy from these vaccines is way more impressive than most of the vaccines we have had historically, even with the new variants coming up with it, which is another topic we can talk about down the road. But even with those variants, you're still getting very good efficacy from the vaccine candidates that are on the market right now. So I'm really comfortable with the science. I'm really comfortable with the efficacy from the data we have seen so far. And I encourage anyone who has access to get the vaccine to do so.
You are comfortable. Patricia, are you comfortable?
So for us here in Ontario, they're having, it's a little bit of a different rollout. So the first phase, I guess, was healthcare professionals, but it also had, it wasn't necessarily that all healthcare professionals were in that line. So there were people that were possibly in like more direct patient care. So the ones that are in hospitals, that are in long-term care facilities, like, so there is a little bit of it, almost like a tier of who's getting the vaccines first. So once those, aside from those healthcare professionals that were in those either hospital settings, long-term care settings, in addition to those, patients were also being vaccinated. So long-term care seniors were all being vaccinated as well. But again, it was like you needed the individual's consent. So it's not that they were forcing the vaccine on these residents. So for me, I haven't gotten into that line yet, but I'm sure it's coming. And when the time comes, I will get my vaccine. But at this point, I think Ontario just announced this week that they're looking at seniors that are over 80 to get vaccinated. So they had different tiers. They started with 65 and up and slowly moved up to above 80 this week. But yeah, I mean, the research, as Dr. Kawama mentioned, is there for, especially the studies have been mentioning a lot about the symptomatic COVID illness, so preventing that. But then there is still more data that is needed. For example, any sort of long-term side effects that has, like, we haven't had enough time for them to study that. But when the time comes, I'm sure I will get vaccinated as well.
Long-term side effects. Of course, there's a lot of confusion that is going on right now. And as Dr. Kawama has mentioned, the variation between the times, usually medications take up to around a decade for testing, proper testing, and then releasing by the CDC. But this one, even though the technology has been around since 1995, it took only about 10 months to come up with apparently an effective vaccination. I'm glad that Dr. Kawama has taken it and he has had mild symptoms. But what do we tell people who are still skeptical? For example, there's a video that I'm going to show you. This video, I adapted it from Fox News. I don't know how credible Fox is, but Dr. Kawama can tell us.
They really don't have answers as to what happened to their loved one. They tell me he was healthy, he was fine, until he took the second dose of the Pfizer vaccine.
I can't describe the pain that we're all experiencing. It's just, I don't wish it on anyone, right? And he was such a good person.
I had no clue I was going to lose my dad. And
the Zuck family is devastated. Kyle lost his dad, and Rochelle lost her husband of 37 years. Tim Zuck was 60 years old. He worked as an X-ray technologist in Santa Ana. As a healthcare worker, he was excited to finally have protection against coronavirus. This was his last Facebook post. He wrote, "Never been so excited to get a shot before. I am now fully vaccinated after receiving my second Pfizer dose." But just 2 hours after getting the vaccine, Tim started having abdominal pain, and suddenly breathing was a struggle. It was all downhill from there.
And the doctors believe that his body reacted to something after he took the vaccine. And they call it an inflammatory reaction. And that's the body trying to figure out what's going on and protect itself. But it was so intense that it started attacking major organs, and he never had a chance to recover.
What do we tell people? What do we tell people, Dr. Kawama? What do we tell people or our communities to enlighten them about the benefits of being vaccinated, especially after they see such videos on major media houses like Fox?
Yeah, and that's definitely a very sad story, and I always, Any healthcare provider, we definitely send our condolences to the families of those who were affected. When you're getting the COVID vaccine, there's a questionnaire you answer, and they try to weed out some of the potential adverse reaction. Especially there are people who generally are allergic to certain medications. It doesn't have to be a COVID vaccine. You can even be taking a Tylenol or paracetamol or any other medication. There are people who generally develop anaphylactic reactions to certain medications. Some people are even allergic to peanuts. So allergies are things which happen often, but we always have to be careful, especially when you're receiving a vaccine. They ask you if you have had a history of any anaphylactic reaction to any medicines and the infusions you have received, to try to eliminate the incidence of some of the those reactions which they talked about. Now, of course, sometimes the challenge is people understanding the chemicals and the active ingredients and some of the chemicals they have in this vaccine. So that's why it's very important to always consult your healthcare provider if you are not sure, who has a better understanding of your medical history, to kind of tell you if you are prone to getting such reactions. But definitely, if overall vaccines are a risk-benefit analysis. If you look at the number of people who are dying every day in the United States, we are still losing about 2,000 people a day. So if you look at the numbers in terms of the percentages being saved by the vaccine versus the few rare instances, which are regrettable, but again, vaccines and medications in general are always a risk-benefit analysis. So overall, there's more benefit in getting a vaccine than having those rare incidents of reaction. But obviously, our job as healthcare providers is trying to make sure we do a thorough process of educating our patients when they come to get these vaccines, to make sure they go through the questionnaire, they understand the questions. Sometimes people have language barriers. Sometimes people do not understand what they are reading. So it's very important that they read through the blueprint of these vaccines. They understand what the risks are. They understand their medical history. There are many certain areas where if you're pregnant right now, they don't advise you to get the vaccine. If you are a child, because they haven't done any trials in pregnant women, those trials just started last week by Pfizer. They enrolled 3,000 women to start that trial. And the reason why this vaccine came out early, I think you touched on that, is because of the casualties we are facing right now. Normally it would take 10 years, but they rushed it without completing trials in all the demographics, in children, in pregnant women, but they released it in a certain demographic of adults just to make sure at least they limit the number of people who are dying every day. So that's why we have an emergency authorization. It's not normal to have emergency authorization for these vaccines. It just happens in areas where you have a disease like Ebola, for instance. When we had Ebola, they had emergency authorization of the vaccine, the Ebola vaccine, just to make sure they save lives. It's the same thing which is happening with COVID. They're still doing studies to determine the long-term side effects of these vaccines. But in the meantime, it was necessary, based on the preliminary results they had, that showed that there was 90% efficacy, to start saving some lives. So there are systems in place to address these adverse effects. For COVID vaccine, here we have the CDC, which has the vaccine adverse event reaction system, where you report adverse reactions, among others, where they give you an app now after you get your COVID vaccine, where you can report your daily symptoms or side effects. So there are measures in place to make sure they regulate or monitor what's going on. But overall, the general message is to read the blueprint, do a thorough job of talking to your healthcare providers before you get the vaccine, to make sure you don't have any contraindications.
Any comments, Patricia?
No, I agree with what Dr. Kawama mentioned. A lot of like, it's unfortunate after watching that video, what the loss of life is never a good thing. But it is true that there's a lot of different ingredients, both medicinal and non-medicinal, that are in the actual current vaccines. And it is important to know what is in there. For example, one of the ingredients that's in both is polyethylene glycol, which is something that you find in a laxative or a bowel preparation agent, right? So if someone was allergic to that, they shouldn't get the COVID vaccine. So anyone that has, at least the current ones that are on the market, anyone that has any sort of allergic reactions or actual allergies to any of the ingredients that are in there should not be getting that type of medication. And even the studies in general, when the studies are done, for the most part, they usually look at healthy individuals with no medical conditions, with they excluded pregnant women in some of the studies, and some of the people that did get pregnant, it wasn't intentional, but it just happened that they were on the COVID studies, and then they got pregnant. So women that were breastfeeding were excluded from these studies. Some individuals that were immunocompromised and their conditions were not stable were excluded from these studies. And as a result, sometimes these exclusions, when a vaccine comes out or any drug is available for a mass population, it's hard to find someone that fits those specific parameters, right? So now we're seeing the vaccine in the regular population. So it is something that surveillance is required, and ongoing surveillance is important. And that's why anyone that gets a vaccine, you are told of your potential risks and benefits. And then also you are given information of what to do in case of an allergic reaction and who to contact, because all that information, all that data that's going to be gathered from any sort of side effects will be used to better tailor not just the vaccine, but give more advice to others that are thinking of getting it. So it will change how the drug product monograph lists potential side effects or potential contraindications. So it is important that anyone that gets one knows their history, but if they don't, discuss it with your family physician, because they know better as far as what you're allergic to and what you're not.
I do have more questions for you, but I wanted us to explore Robina's question here. Is this vaccine going to be offered like the flu vaccine, like annually, on an annual basis, or whoever gets it now is good?
I think that's the question which is still unanswered yet, because they are still trying to determine the progression of this pandemic. If it's going to be something which, I mean, so far most of the researchers are talking about this COVID being with us for a long time. Now the question is, will it continue to be? Can it be controlled with a vaccine? I think that's what we are yet to see. If we can contain it with 80% of the population, if we can get that vaccinated and have herd immunity, the population, then most of the predictions are that it might become a seasonal disease the way we have the flu. But again, those are all still predictions because it will take time for these questions to be answered. But there is potential that it could become like a flu where it's a seasonal disease. Right now, the flu is more deadly in the Western world during the fall and winter season. So is the COVID vaccine also going to become a seasonal disease? Because we saw the numbers go up during the fall as well as, which is the traditional flu season. Last fall, the numbers escalated in the United States and other parts of the world. So it's possible that this could become a seasonal disease, which might require a seasonal shot, because at the same time, we also don't have answers yet how long the antibodies are going to stay in your system. Right now, if you get a natural infection, they're saying up to 90 days. If you get a regular COVID infection without a vaccine, they're saying you're protected up to 90 days. For the vaccine, we don't know yet after the 2 doses how long those antibodies are going to last in the system. obviously your immune system is able to have what we call, I don't want to go into immunology class right now, the T cell and memory cells. But so you have immunity which is generated over the long term, whether you have antibodies or not. But again, those questions are all unanswered because we are still waiting. This was a one-year project. So we're still trying to figure out how effective these vaccines are going to be over the long term. And then we have the issue of mutations where you have new variants coming up because every virus is trying to survive. When you come up with solution, like a vaccine, like treatments, the viruses are trying to figure out how do I survive and beat that vaccine. So that's how you have these mutations happening. And you might have more infectious varieties, possibly, hopefully not, for the good of our livelihoods, but sometimes that's a possibility. So to answer that question, there's a lot we don't know, but the predictions are that it could be a seasonal disease which could require seasonal vaccination.
I'm not sure if Patricia has something to add on to that.
I mean, as Dr. Kawama mentioned, it is very much an evolving situation. The situation is very fluid, and the studies are still looking to follow up on even their participants, to follow up and have a bit of more of a long-term data on them. So we're learning new things as we go along. Like every minute, something new is coming. So it's still unanswered as far as how long this vaccine will last in your system. It's still unanswered.
Still unanswered.
Yeah.
Still unanswered. So I guess I'm going to have to ask you a personal question now, especially after what all of you have told us. As we are not scientists, in the way that you are, the way that you deal with medication, you interact with medication on a daily basis. Do you trust the vaccine? Do you have reservations? And what is the science behind COVID-19? The COVID-19 vaccines.
That's a good question. Do we trust the vaccine? Yes, I tried the vaccine. I trust the vaccine. Vaccines have been one of the greatest revolutionary discoveries in human history. If you look at some of the killer diseases that used to wipe out communities, we have, we come from, Uganda, the rest of us come from Africa. We have seen the infant mortality rate in some of these countries that still have lower immunization rates among children. If you look at measles, if you look at tuberculosis, if you look at diphtheria, tetanus. So most of those diseases have been contained because of vaccine technology. So vaccines do work. There's no question about that. And the way you create immunity is by exposing your body to a foreign object. It develops antibodies and you develop natural immunity. So the science is very clear how we develop immunity to disease. So there is no question about that because we have had centuries and centuries since Edward Jenner and the rest came up with the vaccines that have wiped out certain diseases completely. And if you look at people who have what I call the anti-vaxxer camp, who get comfortable and say, oh, we no longer have measles, why should I immunize my kids? We have seen outbreaks in certain communities that stop vaccinating their kids, which is confirmation that really this science works. It protects our community. Right now, they are estimating about 2.5 million lives are saved per year by vaccination. So there is no doubt what the impact of vaccines is. And for vaccines to be approved, there's independent review of experts who look at this data and comb through it for safety and efficacy. So they looked through the data that Pfizer, Morderna, Johnson & Johnson, and AstraZeneca presented, and they were able to prove that indeed there was efficacy and safety of these vaccines. Now, as more studies are conducted, some adjustments can be made because, again, this is all an evolving process. But to answer your question, yes, are vaccines effective and safe at this moment? Yes, I trust the system. And so far it has given us 2 good vaccines which I believe are going to save life. And it's the only chance right now we have for life to go back to normal. I think we're all tired of being in our houses. And people with kids cannot go to school. You can't even go to a movie theater or a restaurant. So I think we have really seen what life would be like without vaccines. And I know there are many people who spread conspiracies online about, vaccines and that kind of thing. But now they have had an opportunity to show us their solutions, and I haven't seen any solutions. But the great scientists have worked hard and put together amazing technology in the space of 12 months, and I think it's likely to make a big impact on this coming year. So yes, I do believe in science, and I think it's gonna help us contain this pandemic.
Thank you so much, Dr. Kawama. Patricia, can you answer Onana's question? When do we expect these vaccines to have full approval versus EUA?
Versus, what does EUA stand for? Sorry.
I don't know what that means, but
when do we expect them to have full approval? Well, I believe, I guess I don't understand what EUA means, but I will say that, for example, various regions or countries are approving various vaccines. So in Canada, we have Pfizer and Morderna have been approved, and I believe the AstraZeneca is pending. Other countries have different vaccines that they've approved. So each country looks at the data and tries to see, make sure that it's safe for their patient population or safe for their countrymen and women, and then makes a decision based on that. And as I mentioned, in Canada, so far it's just Moderna and Pfizer that have shown the efficacy, but the other ones, I believe in Canada, there's probably about 7 that are pending, but at some point, I think if the trials show that they are effective, then they will also be approved. So it's patient specific. Yeah.
All right. So EUA means emergency use authorization. But I do have another question here from Cynthia. Cynthia says, what are some of the ingredients that make up the vaccines? So I think people need to understand what are some of the products that are being used to create these vaccines, so that they can relate and probably have more trust with the vaccines. I don't know what you guys think. Dr. Kawama, any thoughts on that? Do you know the ingredients they use?
I have them here. They are really mouthy. I don't know if
anything familiar that you want to share, or do you want to send them to our website?
I think Patricia mentioned the polyethylene glycol is the key one they're highlighting, because we commonly see it in many laxatives. Miralax is the brand name of the laxative we have here in the United States, which has polyethylene glycol. So if you're allergic to that, you are likely to probably be contraindicated. Both the vaccines, the Moderna and Pfizer, have sucrose in them. Those are the potassium chloride is in the Pfizer one. They have some cholesterol, but most of these are really inactive ingredients that help stabilize the vaccine. Definitely, it's important to look up these online. If you have a history of allergies, that's what I tell people. Look through your medical history. For instance, some of us growing up, just speaking in general, if I was allergic to chloroquine, I know it used to itch. My whole body used to itch whenever they gave me chloroquine. So make sure when you go to your doctor's office, you report these allergies. They're very important. If you're allergic to antibiotics, I know I'm bringing up other things besides vaccine, but just the general idea of allergic reactions, it can be anything. So if you're allergic to a certain chemical, whether it's Tylenol, it's Motrin, it's Aleve, just mention it to your doctor so that they keep those on file. So that when you are getting a vaccine, most of the time now, especially in the Western world, we have modernized system that sometimes the computer might even flag an allergy before I know it. So sometimes if you report this information, it's in a database. The pharmacist makes our job easier, because I can just look through your file, see what you're allergic to before I give you a vaccine, and I know that it might not be recommended for you to take this vaccine because of this allergy that you reported when we're taking your biographic information. So I think that's really what I'll say about this issue. But yeah, the ingredients are available online. I think it's important for people to just go online. Pfizer and Morderna, they have all put out their information. The pamphlet has, and it's very simple information. It has what you should avoid, what you should expect when you get the vaccine, the ingredients that are in that vaccine, all of them are reported online. Before you get the vaccine, take some time and read that information. If there's anything you don't understand, share it with your provider so they can guide you if you should be a candidate for this vaccine.
So I think that's very important. Essentially, each one of us need to know who we are, need to understand who we are, what we are allergic to, and what we need to do. So we need to be more forthcoming, more truthful, and honest when we go to fill out this form so that they can better diagnose us. Patricia, do you want to comment on that?
No, I agree with what you're saying, what both of you have mentioned. It is important to give your healthcare provider as much information as possible, because without that, you're doing yourself a disservice. So whether it's your family physician or it's at your pharmacy, they usually have some sort of database or computer system that they can incorporate your list of allergies to, and then make the decision based on that as to whether you're a good candidate or not. For some of the, like, let's say someone was allergic to peanuts, or let's say they were allergic to eggs or whatnot, certain allergies, you might find that you can still get the Pfizer or the Moderna vaccine. And then for others, depending on what the reaction was, they might want to watch you for a little bit longer. I know normally when we give out injections, if it's, let's say, for a flu shot or whatnot, and someone said that they'd had allergies before, we might require them to stay around the pharmacy for a little bit longer so that we can observe them. So maybe we'd observe them for 15 to 30 minutes versus someone who never had any allergies on file. So if someone doesn't have any allergies, they may not only need to stick around for about 10 to 15 minutes. So these are certain conversations that are very, very important, especially when you're getting something new like the COVID vaccine.
All right, and we do have another question from Grace. There's a couple of questions coming in now. I do have my own questions, but I want to give the community an opportunity to ask their questions, because I don't want to think for all of them. So there is a question coming from Grace, specifically in regards to allergies. As we discuss allergies at the moment, she says, how safe is this medication for children who are still developing? It's very hard to tell if they have allergic reactions. What do we do if you're parents?
Well, I mean, for these vaccines, they haven't really been studied in a young patient population. So I believe the Pfizer vaccine, there were some studies between the ages of 12 and 15, but it's approved for 16 and up. And then the Moderna is the 18 and up. So for children at this point, they're not in the category of getting them until there is some sort of data and efficacy and safety available. But in general, for parents, if let's say down the line they get approved for those age groups, if a child's never had a COVID vaccine and it is now approved, then you would have to monitor them, because even the healthcare professional, when they inject a child, or whether it's a child or an adult that's never had a particular medication, they have to be monitored, as I mentioned before, for about 10 to 15 minutes, depending on if they have an allergy profile or not. So the same goes for kids. And then as a parent, if you know that this is the first time that your child's getting an injection, you would also do some monitoring while you're at home. The day after they get the injection, you're looking at them, you're checking on them, and looking out to see if there's any sort of allergic reaction. So typically the signs of an allergic reaction are difficulty breathing, difficulty swallowing, or a rash. And then anything out of the ordinary that you don't normally see in your child, that be sure to report it right away. But at this point, these vaccines are not approved for children.
Thank you so much. Dr. Kawama, Robina has a question here. Is there any research that has been done in regards to the alternative medicine other than getting the vaccines?
Well, there's a lot of treatments which are being used in the hospitals, but the most prominent one when you're critically ill, the monoclonal antibodies. But at the end of the day, like most of the technology is geared towards boosting your immune system. So it's safer probably for you to get the vaccine. I wouldn't wait until I'm in the ICU on the ventilator to think that's a better option than getting a vaccine. So, you know, rather than thinking about getting critically ill, because like I mentioned earlier, natural immunity, getting immunity from COVID-19, from getting the actual infection is shown protection for up to 90 days. But getting 2 doses of the vaccine are likely to give you more long-term protection than the actual illness. So the best solution to that is getting the vaccine. I wouldn't, and that's one of the things when we talk about vaccine hesitance, it comes out a lot. Like many people say, you know what, when I get sick, I can get immunity. Now, there are some diseases where, yes, when you get the natural illness, you develop long-term immunity. But for COVID-19, it's still questionable how long the antibodies last in the body from the natural infection. So it's still advisable to get the vaccine, to get long-term immunity. Now, I saw another question. Somebody was asking, is it okay? Sorry, I'm taking over your job, Mr.
Yeah, that's okay. Go ahead.
Someone was asking, is it okay for me to wear a mask after getting a vaccine? Yes, you have to continue wearing a mask because the vaccines are 95% effective. That means you still have that 5% for the Pfizer, and then the 94% for Morderna, you still have that 6%. And for the Johnson & Johnson, 70% efficacy, you still have that 30% when you can still get COVID, you know, and get illness. So it doesn't mean when you got the vaccine, it's not 100%. So you have to continue wearing your face mask so that you protect yourself from exposure. Now, not only yourself, you have to protect others from getting exposed. You might be immune, but you still carry the vaccine in your nasal area. When you sniff, when you cough, you can still spread it to other people, even when you are immune. You are protected, but they are not, the people you are around. So those two reasons that we don't have 100% effective vaccines, and you still able to spread the vaccine, it's important to continue wearing your face masks, social distance, and follow that hygiene even after getting the vaccine. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Kawama. Patricia, do you want to comment on those two questions?
Yeah, the vaccine is not the be all and end all. You still have to practice those public health measures, whether it's masks, social distancing, staying away from people that are sick. And in addition to the other question about the alternative medicines, nothing is proven yet. But we do know for sure that what we know is that COVID, there's some people that have higher, they're higher risk factors of contracting COVID. And aside from those that are elderly, there's people that have heart disease, lung disease, obesity, diabetes, hypertension. So these are all other risk factors that someone can look at. Not all of them. I mean, some things can be genetics, in which case you can't change, and you also can't change your age. But you can deal with some of these modifiable risk factors. Like if it's something about a diet, exercise, active lifestyle, these are all things that we can all do. They recommend weekly amount of 150 minutes of exercise. So anything that you can do that can decrease your risk factors, the modifiable ones, can go a long way in just keeping you healthy, your heart and your body healthy altogether. It's not going to prevent you from getting COVID, but you will not be at a higher risk, because there's higher risk categories of individuals that can get the disease much easily than others.
Well, thank you so much. There's another question from Jordan. Sorry, not Jordan, Jonathan Hausbach. Now, this one is very personal. It's a very personal question. He says, what are your thoughts regarding the notions that the vaccine causes damage to the placenta or potentially makes men impotent? Should we be worried that we are not going to have children if we take this medication?
They have actually conducted studies on that among women that have been infected with COVID. They haven't shown any evidence that COVID vaccine does actually affect the placenta or causes infertility. Now, what they have shown is that women who are pregnant are more likely to get severe effect from severe disease from COVID, or more likelihood to go on the ventilator when you're pregnant. But the COVID itself, as well as the vaccine, they haven't done the trials yet for women who are pregnant because of the exclusion, which my co-panelists mentioned earlier. But the people who got pregnant during the trials, they didn't show any effects of the vaccine on the child, on the placenta, or affecting fertility. So that's another the statement that that has been made in that regard is not accurate based on the research which is out there on the impact of the vaccine on the pregnant women, as well as the placenta in general.
So in other words, we shouldn't be so worried. Patricia, should I be worried?
Well, at this point, like as Dr. Kawama mentioned, there's still more data that's being collected. And if someone is pregnant right now and considering getting the vaccine, you really need to sit down and have that discussion with your primary care provider, because maybe you have other risk factors, like maybe you're pregnant, diabetic, have high blood pressure and all these other things which would put you at greater risk of getting COVID to begin with. So you really have to have that discussion with your primary care provider to see what your risks are, and just to have almost like a risk benefit analysis to see whether you would be a good candidate, because as Dr. Kawama mentioned, the studies in pregnant women are still, like, they just literally started. So there's still more data to be collected, but based on what is out currently, there's not much information aside from that. So,
Dr. Kawama, another question has come in for you. Are there people who have had COVID more than once since it was discovered a year ago? More than a year ago?
Yes, there are several scenarios to that question. There have been people who have got COVID after getting 2 doses of the vaccine. We have had even a member of Congress here who got COVID vaccine, but the vaccine protects you from getting severe illness. Mm-hmm. So you can still contract it, but the vaccine protects you from getting severe illness. So the same applies to natural disease. They have shown that within the first 90 days, they've shown that antibody protection was sufficient from getting a second infection. But after the 90 days, they have shown that people who have contracted COVID are more prone after 90 days have elapsed. So yes, you can get COVID after getting a vaccine, but you're protected from getting severe disease. You can get COVID the second time. After the 90 days, you're more prone. And also people who get COVID, there's been incidences where the side effects linger on. After 8 months, 9 months, there have been people who have had lingering side effects or even effects of the disease coming back. So there's still a lot that needs to be found out. Again, everything, it's a fluid situation. There's a lot we don't know about the disease. There's issues about the lung tissue, if it's affected long term, and so forth. So most of this information we'll find out as time goes on.
Thank you so much, Dr. Kawama. Patricia, can one receive the COVID-19 vaccine if they are currently infected?
So they don't recommend getting the vaccine while you are actively sick. So again, you would want to wait for that to clear up. And then afterwards, you can get the injection. I mean, if someone has a low-grade fever, but it's not actually COVID, or they just have a slight runny nose, it could be okay to have that injection as long as there's no other contraindications. But if you actually tested COVID positive, you should wait until that disease itself clears up before actually getting the COVID-19 vaccine.
Thank you so much. Now, Dr. Kawama, you spoke about the tensions between policy and science. And I want to put this question to you. How should we negotiate? How do we negotiate those tensions between politics and policy? Specifically, in the context of the third world, for example, Uganda, because as far as we know, people in third world countries, people in Africa are likely to get medication in 2023 or 2024, based on how the vaccines roll out. What do you suggest policymakers, both in the global north and global south, should negotiate the tensions between politics and policy? And who should be the first people that receive this vaccination when it goes to the global south?
Yeah, I think that question, I'll answer it in the big picture, that COVID vaccine has exposed the inequality we have in the world today. Health disparities. If you look at, not even in Africa, but here in the United States, and I believe even Canada, the communities that have been most ravaged by COVID are usually minorities, people with low economic means, people who have no health insurance, and people who are struggling to make ends meet. So the pandemic has really showed that healthcare still is really broken down in terms of our social status and access to healthcare and resources. And that, if you look at Africa in general, that's the complaints people have today, is that if you look at the countries which are receiving vaccines, because vaccines had to be rationed because the companies making them are not many, and there's high demand pretty much for the global population. And if you look at the distribution of vaccines, our countries are barely getting any help or assistance in terms of getting vaccine to the population. So I think that's an issue which we have to look at. The issue of equality and equity in the healthcare system is still a very crucial area. And that's when you talk about vaccine hesitancy, those are the issues which rub people the wrong way, to use that terminology. If you look at the Tuskegee, if you look at that history among the minority population being used as test subjects, you know, we are not on the front lines when we need to get healthcare, but when they need to do studies, you hear about trials happening in Africa and happening in Brazil and so forth, but these countries are usually not on the front line of getting access to these vaccines. So for me, that's an issue which has been historic in nature. Several steps have been taken to make sure these historical mistakes are corrected, but still, we're in a world which is still surrounded by social inequality, where racism is still prevalent, and this inequality has really been exposed by the COVID-19 pandemic. So that's where policymakers have to look. Because the pandemic is not going to only affect the poor neighborhoods, because when you are rich, you need to go to a restaurant. If your waiter lives in a poor neighborhood and they carry the disease, you can be well off and you come to a restaurant and you're going to get the disease. Or if you send your kids to school, they're going to interact with schools from other neighborhoods as well. So I think policymakers have to understand that a vaccine distribution has to be equally done among, especially I think in my opinion, there should be higher priority to areas which are more affected, especially minority communities, because that's the way you're going to control the pandemic. not only by treating people who are well off, but treating everybody equally so that we can get control of this disease.
And that's very important, especially when you talk about minority groups here, both in Canada and the United States. The numbers show that specifically in the US, when you look at New York, for example, most of the areas that have been ravaged are those which are predominantly Hispanic and Blacks. So, Patricia, what do you think? Who would you give vaccinations to? Would it be the over 69%, over 69 years of age, or people who live in a communal home or corrections, for example? Who do you choose? Do you choose people who are asthmatic, or do you choose prisoners?
That's a tough decision. I think when you look at who COVID has impacted the most, I mean, yes, it's a global disease. It's a global pandemic. We're all experiencing it. But it's predominantly the elderly. And the elderly, specifically the ones that are in like long-term care facilities that have been, because I guess you're congregating, right? And this disease is a respiratory disease that's being passed around by droplets. So anyone that's in those closed communal quarters has a higher chance of passing it along. So that's where you see the advanced age, the long-term care homes being affected, indigenous communities because of the reserves and how people live. And even for minorities, sometimes you might be in a household and there's several generations all in one household, right? And for minorities as well, because of the careers that we're in, right? So a lot of us are in service careers, a lot of us are essential workers. So you find that this disease is going through a lot of minorities, elderly, and it's hard to figure out who to disperse those vaccines to, because everyone is important at the end of the day. So it is a tough decision for policymakers. And again, this also goes for prisons, like it's also going in there. So I believe public health measures are important, but it's a very tough decision to figure out who to give these vaccines to. As long as there's no contraindications and someone can safely take the vaccine, I would give it.
Right. Dr. Kawama, should people who are asthmatic continue to wear masks even when they feel completely uncomfortable?
Yes, I think they should be able to continue wearing masks, because I'm sure there are people who are asthmatic who are doctors and surgeons and physicians, and they work in those masks every day, and they probably wear the N95, which are even more difficult to breathe in. So yes, I think if you're asthmatic, you're actually more prone to getting the pandemic and getting severe disease from COVID-19. Yes, I think they should continue wearing the face masks, but obviously they should take, if you have an albuterol inhaler that you have to take every day, make sure you take it. Or your medications, your asthma medications, make sure you take it the way you're supposed to do. But again, you need to protect yourself from COVID if you are asthmatic or not. So that's really my response to that question.
Do you have a response to Mary Buwembo? In Africa, if Africa gets COVID-19 donations, who will the distributions be? How will the distributions be done without any unfair discrimination? Now that's a both political and healthy question. I don't know who wants to go first.
Yeah, those are now political questions. But
Yeah.
I think in general we have an equal distribution of resources in our countries. I think that's even if you make vaccines accessible, there are people in rural areas who are isolated, who have no transport. It's the same challenge we face here in the US. There are some areas which are not near retail pharmacies right now where they're doing the vaccines, or near a hospital where they are isolated. So those are all key barriers that people face. And in Africa, it's probably even worse. In our countries, there are people who spend generations without going to the doctor's office because they are afraid they cannot afford it. They don't even have money for transport to go to the hospital. So distribution of vaccines is not just COVID vaccines, because we have diseases which are killing more people than COVID in Uganda. If you look at malaria, if you look at other diseases which are still killing a lot of people back home. So yes, healthcare resources are still needed to protect our people, and even more so with COVID-19 vaccine. Fortunately, I mean, assuming the problem we have with Uganda, for instance, and other African countries is we haven't been testing enough. So it's really hard to know what the true statistics is in terms of the prevalence of COVID as well as the mortality data. So it's really hard for me to say. If you go online right now, they say only 333 Ugandans have died from COVID. You know, that like you look at such data, even in the US, the data they're reporting right now is on the low end. They show that probably the mortality is a lot higher than that. So we need better data collection, and that's something where we need to do. People in policy who are policymakers. That's an area where we need to improve to make sure we do data collection. People get tested, so we know where the resource needs are. At the moment, I think all of that is lacking. But overall, yes, we need ideally better distribution of resources. I wish they also do, because right now vaccines are still limited. So that's why they're doing the preference that if you're 70 and above, if you're 60, so you're starting with a high risk category. So I think that will be the same formula I would recommend for our countries. Start with the most vulnerable population, our elderly, and then you go downwards to the people who are at less risk of getting COVID-19.
It's very important that you have mentioned how Africa is not reporting, is not doing proper reporting. In the case of Tanzania, they have written in Times and the New York Times that President Magufuli has now started acknowledging that indeed Tanzanians are dying from COVID, but there is no proper mechanism of following up of collecting this data. So I'm just wondering, what kind of data do you think citizens need at their disposal to make more informed decisions? Patricia.
Sorry, what kind of data do they need to make more informed decisions about whether to get COVID or like the COVID vaccine or?
About whether to take the vaccines and if it's good for them. Because
for sure. So, I mean, you need to know what we've already mentioned, you need to know what your allergies are. And you also need to know what, you can look based on the studies. There's some people that were excluded out of those studies. So if the more studies and the more information that comes out, then we'll be able to answer a bit more questions. But for example, someone that's pregnant or breastfeeding may want to have that discussion with their family their healthcare provider, with their doctor before actually getting the vaccine. But for other citizens, it's if you don't have any contraindications and you don't have any allergies, then you have to look and see as a risk-benefit analysis. Are you at greater risk of contracting COVID-19? If you're not in a service industry, or if you're not an essential worker, or you don't fall in any of those categories, then maybe you can hold off on getting it if that's your choice, right? At the end of the day, the vaccines are not being forced on you. It comes down to your personal choice. But as someone, if you were someone that didn't fall into any of the categories, like you're not a high risk, you don't have any other conditions or anything like that, then you can watch and wait and look at the long-term effects maybe and see if you'll be a better candidate then. But if you actually have other conditions that put you at risk, then you may need to get that vaccine after you've had consultation with your primary care provider.
Dr. Kawama, so let us just say that I have taken Pfizer and I have gotten severe are they symptoms or whatever?
Mm-hmm.
Can I change from Pfizer to Oxford-Astrazeneca or Morderna before completing the dose?
Now, at the moment, they don't recommend mixing the vaccine because there's no all the trials that have been done with either 2 doses of Pfizer or 2 doses of Moderna.
Yeah, because the reason I'm asking that is because usually they tell us that if you are getting bad reactions, if you are taking Tylenol, you can stop taking Tylenol and try Advil. Does this work with the COVID vaccines?
Yes,
And why not, if it doesn't?
There is some more blueprint to that, because I was reading through the guidelines and they were saying if, for instance, a scenario happens where somebody forgot which vaccine they received for the first dose, wait at least 28 days to give them a second dose of either vaccine, if it's Pfizer or Moderna. If somebody forgot what they got initially, or if you have no record or documentation of what they got as the first dose. But ideally, you want to have the same. If it's Pfizer, the first dose, make sure you wait 21 days and get the second dose of the Pfizer. If it's a Moderna, wait 28 days and get your second dose of Moderna. And somebody was asking if you can get another vaccine in between. Right now, they recommend waiting 14 days. If you get, let's say, you go to your pharmacy and they give you your shingles vaccine, or if you get your pneumonia vaccine. So you have to wait at least 14 days before getting a COVID vaccine. So you cannot mix those vaccines within the same window. If you have to wait either 21 days or 28 days, you can't get anything else in between. So that's not recommended at the moment.
Patricia, I saw you shaking your head.
Yeah, no, I was agreeing with Dr. Kawama because at the end of the day, there's no studies on that. So yes, it would be ideal that if someone had a reaction to one, they could just switch midway, but they haven't actually done the studies on that. So until there is some sort of guidance on that, it's better to stick with what has been studied so far, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Where can we get this information? Are there any reports publicly available for laymen like me who are not scientists?
Yeah, there's a lot of information online, through the CDC. CDC is a really good resource, and I don't know in Canada what your reliable healthcare resource is, but CDC is really good information. In the United States, if you call the pharmacy, we have to answer your questions. So call your pharmacist. If you have any question, I think we're the most abused healthcare providers because anyone can call you and you have to answer their questions. They don't pay you anything. So call your pharmacist if you have questions and ask them if you're not sure about vaccines or if you have questions about the vaccine. But overall, avoid stuff on Facebook and I know there's some cases where there are reliable information on social media because that's what we read these days instead of going to the real news. But be very careful when you read things online because right now, most of the studies which have been shown, more people believe today that vaccines are more dangerous than the disease than they did in 2011. I think it was 6% in 2011. Right now, you have over 15% of people who think vaccines are more dangerous than the disease. You also have people who believe it's not necessary to get the vaccine anymore. So there's a lot of room that has been given to anti-vaxxers, even on media, on really mainstream media, they will get a room on the desk to debate whether vaccines are effective or not. So there's so much misinformation out there about vaccines, but I always encourage people to go to reliable sources of information, talk to your provider if you're not sure, and make sure you rely less on conspiracies because those conspiracies can cost you your life or even the life of your children if you decide not to vaccinate them. So again, vaccines are not, sometimes I know they mandate them in certain situations, but most of the time it's a choice you have to make, like Patricia mentioned, as an individual. But make sure the information you rely on to make that decision is credible information so that you make the right decision for you and for your family.
So Grace asks, should we believe in home remedy? Because I know before the vaccine came in, we were using a lot of home remedy. I used it myself. So the question is, should we believe in home remedy? For those of you who understand home remedy, Patricia, you want to respond to Grace?
Yeah, so home remedies, I mean, there's no studies on those, but as long as it's not harming you, you can continue to do your own home remedy, but make sure that even if you're doing your home remedy, you're still following the public health measures. Like, you still need to wear a mask, you still need to social distance, you still need to stay away from people that are sick. But as far as a home remedy to prevent you from contracting COVID, there's nothing that has been proven as of yet. So even if someone was doing a home remedy, if you fell into the category that you should be getting a vaccine, don't put off on getting a vaccine because you're going to think the home remedy is going to help you. But look, as Dr. Kawama said, look at reputable sources to get information. I mean, in Canada, we have the National Advisory Committee on Immunizations, also known as NACI. They give you, there's real statements on what to do given certain situations, and they even tell you what the evidence is that is available. Or you could look at the World Health Organization, the CDC, which Dr. Kawama mentioned, and then make your decision from there. As my mom always reminds me, and that people need to get off of WhatsApp University and really rely on credible sources for information at the end of the day, because your life is at risk, your children's lives are at risk. So you really have to look and see what is out there, and then make a decision. And the decision should be made with patient consent. Like, it shouldn't be forced.
All right, Dr. Kawama, any comments?
Yeah, I mean,
regarding home remedies.
I thought you were asking me about WhatsApp University.
You could also respond to that.
Home remedies, you know, the important thing is to make sure you are healthy.
Yeah.
I think that's, if you look at the main idea around home remedies is for people to get enough sleep, because anything that stresses your body out makes you more prone to getting not just COVID, but other diseases as infection. Most people stay online until 3 in the morning, you know. Get enough rest. Mr. Sally, I don't know if you're one of those. At least 8 hours of sleep every night. Eat healthy. If you can't, at least take a multivitamin. They recommend vitamin C sources. Right now, vitamin D has also been shown to be a little bit helpful. So make sure you have a good source of vitamin D, vitamin C, or just take a multivitamin. Some people take zinc. But most of these supplements, the whole idea is to make sure you eat healthy, stay healthy, exercise, make sure, you know, you limit the pre-existing conditions that most of the people that are prone to COVID have, like such as overweight. Try to cut down on weight, exercise, stay healthy every day, eat healthy. And I think, to me, those are the home remedies, not just for COVID, but if you look at cardiovascular disease, and all those other diseases, diabetes, they are more prone among people of color, especially African Americans here in the United States, and I believe also in Canada, because of the lifestyle, of the diet, nutrition we have. So it's important for people to those home remedies should be a daily thing, not just when we have COVID, but also in our daily lives, to cut down on the incidence of cardiovascular disease, diabetes, which is right now killing a lot more people in our community than COVID.
Right. Well, you're telling us to maintain our weights. Something that we had trouble doing when we were going out on a regular basis. Now that we are inside the houses all the time, any suggestions on how we should nutrient ourselves? What kinds of foods should we run to other than the supplements and other things?
Well, you definitely have to do have a balanced diet. So lots of fruits and vegetables. I believe Dr. Kawama mentioned the various vitamins. But yes, you can get a lot of these things in your diet as well. So if you aren't taking the vitamin C supplement, maybe you're drinking orange juice, maybe you're eating oranges and citrus fruits and vegetables and greens and all of those things, and limiting your salt intake, limiting your sugar intake, drinking water, limiting your alcohol intake. I know COVID has caused us to stay indoors for those that are working in, and for even the facilities that are now closed, but you'd be surprised how many at-home workouts are available online. So you can always find something that you could do. And I mean, the recommendation here is that someone has 150 minutes of exercise. So if you have a workout that requires no equipment, you could do that in the comfort of your home. You just have to be dedicated. And as Dr. Kawama mentioned, that these things will go a long way in decreasing our risk factors for whether it's diabetes, heart, high blood pressure, and anything else. If you're a smoker, cut out smoking, right? So that you're not in the high risk category. But these are things that are lifestyle changes that we could do, not just during COVID, but just to have a healthy life period.
Right. Dr. Kawama,
Yes.
do you think that the governments are going to force everyone to take these medications? Cynthia is wondering if the medication is going to be mandatory. Should we be worried that we are going to be forced to take it?
Yeah, I think Patricia mentioned about Israel earlier, and I think it's one of the countries which has started taking that step. They have, I think, what they call vaccine passports, or something like that. If you want to go to a gym or some of those public facilities, they are requiring you to have one of those. So I suspect some of the areas, because of liability issues, might start requiring some of those. I wouldn't be surprised. In the United States, it's a lot more difficult. There are some schools which mandate certain vaccines. For instance, when I was going to pharmacy school, they required us to all get vaccinated. So there are some cases where these mandates existed already on other vaccines. Some schools do it to the limited extent. But I think that's a really good question going forward for policymakers. It's more challenging in certain areas. The United States will be it's challenging for policymakers because of the way the states are demarcated. Every state wants to make their own rules. But I think there's word of at least being required for flights. But right now, many countries require you to get a COVID vaccine, not vaccine, but a COVID test.
Yeah.
So I think it's likely that down the road, they might require getting a COVID vaccine. And I think for the well-being, for your peace of mind, I think I recommend people getting this vaccine, because if you're going to a public place, you're going to travel, you're going to be on a plane with other, 60 other people or more, it's really important for you to safeguard yourself. So it's likely that's where we are heading, at least in some countries. Canada, you are more likely, you're a little bit more obedient to government rules and regulations. Israel has already done it. I think other countries might start mandating vaccines. But also, some studies have been done when they mandate vaccines. They actually show that it does the opposite effect. When you mandate people, they're like, why is the government forcing us to get this vaccine? So that's why it causes certain populations to actually, instead of getting the vaccine, they decide to revolt because of mandates. So mandates are kind of a double-edged sword. Sometimes it helps you increase the vaccine levels, but in some cases it shows that sometimes people have a tendency of rejecting such mandates from government because they think especially populations like African Americans and people of color, who have a history, especially being racism, of things like Tuskegee. There are always concerns when the government mandates them to take certain medications or treatments.
And saying that actually reminds me that a couple of people have been asking me that is this a plot to depopulize Africa? specifically, because for starters, they are telling us you are going to receive Africans are going to receive the medication in either 2023 or 2024. Secondly, are Africans going to receive the exact same kind of medication that the people in the global north are having right now? Now, those are some of the myths that you folks are supposed to demystify. I don't know what you have to say about that, Patricia.
Well, I don't know. That is definitely out of my scope. But I guess at this point, all I can say is that in Canada, there's certain ones that are being, certain vaccines that have been approved, and there's others that are pending. And the systems here are in such a way that before it even is, before a vaccine comes on the market and is available for Canadian use, it has to have gone through, they have to have looked at the studies, right? I don't know if that's the same process that's going to be done in our African countries, right? So we really do need leaders there that are actually vigilant and really looking at the vaccines that are coming into the country and actually looking at what the studies say before actually starting any sort of immunization. Because right now there's so many that are on the market, and there's also some middlemen and women, I guess, that are selling vaccines that aren't actually vaccines. Like there's words of there's reports of saline being sold as a vaccine, right? So that's where you really need governments and leaders to make sure that they are securing vaccine supplies from reputable sources, so that you don't have any sort of middleman that's trying to sell something else, because you don't know if that could, here it might not pass in the Western world, but you don't know in our African countries whether some steps could be cut out in that procurement of vaccines, which would then result in vaccines that are not good for use, period.
Yeah, and just to add on to that, I think in Uganda we have the National Drug Authority. Sometimes they do a good job of doing work on some of these vaccines. I know there was some issues with the measles vaccines in the past, some of the batches which were received that have been contaminated, but that's the organ we have in Uganda that oversees most of the vaccines that are usually sometimes donated to make sure they are safe for the population. So right now there are some good people, professionals who work for the NDA in Uganda, let's speaking from a perspective of Uganda, that really do a good job of overseeing some of these drug products. Obviously, we have some limitations in terms of resources and manpower, but they are the body who are responsible for screening all the medical products that go through Uganda.
Thank you so much again. Now, the summer is fast approaching. Should we book our tickets? Patricia,
I would love to go on vacation. I feel like the borders have been locked for so long, and even trips were canceled and everything else. It's such a fluid situation, Henry, that it's hard to say. Like, you honestly don't know what's going to happen from the next day, from today to the next day, and sometimes even from the next hour. So if you are going to book, make sure you have some travel insurance just in case you have to cancel. And also look at your workplace. Some workplaces are not allowing their workers to go anywhere because they don't want them to have traveled outside of the country. So I know at my workplace, we go through a screening every single day of whether we have COVID symptoms and also travel things. So you really have to think of it in that sense, that you might book, but you should possibly have travel insurance and cancellation insurance. And in the case of Canada right now, as you mentioned at the beginning of the program, when you come back, you have to stay in a hotel and have $2,000 just in case. So if you're going to book your vacation, also have some money aside for that potential $2,000 bill that you might have to pay, in addition to your COVID test at the country that you're going to, and even when you come back, right?
Right. How about Dr. Kawama? Are you planning to go to Jamaica anytime soon?
Yeah, I canceled many of my trips for the same reasons, because I have to quarantine when I come back for 14 days. And most jobs won't be sympathetic to that. When you tell them, hey, I need 14 days off. So yeah, I think people just have to be cautious when they're traveling. I've seen people travel. People went to Uganda. Others have been, of course, it's a free world. You have to make your own individual decision, but make sure you don't put others at risk, especially if you live with most vulnerable people around you. Most of us who are a little younger can get away with it, but if you have a grandmother at home who has diabetes, or someone who is going through cancer treatment, or others who you live with, just make sure you take the necessary precautions to at least quarantine from them to make sure they are safe. So I think that's all I can say on that matter. I mean, people can travel, but take the necessary precautions. Also know what the requirements are where you're going. There's some countries where you have to do a test back and forth if you're leaving, so you don't get stranded in another country. So do your due diligence. Go to their websites, to the national websites, and see what the travel restrictions are. I know some countries right now, like South Africa right now, based on where the variants are coming from, the government has kind of put restrictions from people at least traveling from South Africa to the United States, and some other countries where some of these COVID variants have been. So that's all information people need to digest before they travel, to make sure they are making the right decisions. But if you can get the COVID vaccine before you travel, even better.
Get the COVID vaccine before you travel.
Yeah.
Okay, so it seems that there's a lot of corporate business that has come up as a result of COVID-19. Do we have any controversies to talk about regarding corporate social responsibility in terms of how much medication is being manufactured, at how much each dose is being sold, who can afford what, and also, can we talk about the different mutations? There's a South African mutation, there's the London mutation, the England mutation, and there are so many other mutations. How do we deal with these, given the medications that we have around today?
So
Anyone can go.
As far as the mutations are concerned, I think the countries that have discovered mutations, especially UK, are the ones who have been doing sequencing. So I don't want to confuse people, because viruses mutate all the time. So you are not going to expect COVID-19 virus to be the same all the time. They mutate all the time. It's a process of natural selection. Anytime they meet challenges, they'll try to adapt to new conditions, new circumstances. So there is mutation happening all the time. That's why I don't even want to call it the South African version or the Brazilian version, because there's mutants already. Because in the United States, they're only doing, I think, 6% of sequencing. In UK, they are doing at least more like 20%. By sequencing is finding out the genome of the actual dominant variety of COVID in those countries. So some countries are doing a better job of finding out which varieties are dominant, others are not. So there are varieties all around, but the main concern with them is, are the vaccines effective with the upcoming variants? That's really the main process. Pfizer has done some trials where they have shown their vaccine is still effective, even with the new variants. Now, the other ones have shown some less efficacy, but still the vaccines are effective. So I encourage people to still get them in spite of the new variants. Those are going to continue happening. Mutations always happen with most of these viruses, but I encourage people to still take the vaccine. It's likely that if a mutation happens where the vaccines are not effective anymore, they'll make some adjustments. But right now, they're encouraging people to still get the same vaccines as we have at the moment. I don't remember the other part of the question.
The other part was about corporations and the investment that is being put into the pharmacies.
In terms of pharmaceutical companies, or I know there are some like Johnson & Johnson where they have made a commitment to make no profit from their vaccine. Pfizer did not make that commitment. So every company is different. And the reason why Pfizer did not is because they refused federal dollars when they were doing their research. There was Operation Warp Speed. I don't know if you had the Operation Warp Speed.
Right.
The US government pumped federal dollars in. Some companies opted in, Pfizer did not opt in. So most of the companies were willing to forego their profits. I mean, they're still getting a lot of money, but Pfizer refused to commit to making no profit out of the vaccine. And of course, that's where the challenges come in, that can our countries afford vaccine in Africa if they have to buy a dose for $28 or $20 or $15 a dose? Which African country is going to afford $15 or $10 a dose to immunize 80% of the population? So definitely the pharmaceutical industry, I think, has a responsibility, especially when we're having a pandemic. All of us want life to go back to normal, but I think cost should not be a barrier where certain countries or regions cannot afford a vaccine because Pfizer wants to make a profit, or AstraZeneca. But again, that's a debate which is beyond us sometimes, you know.
Right.
But definitely it's a good question in terms of people who are taking advantage of the pandemic. And also life has changed in general. Many companies are now letting people work from home. I think that's really one of the big changes that I think is going to happen because of the pandemic.
Right.
Because most companies have realized, why should I rent expensive real estate in Toronto when I can have Mr. Sally work from home and be just as productive? So I think some of these changes are already happening. People are doing more online shopping. There's more delivery. So I think the pandemic has really is going to lead to a lot of innovation that is going to affect our life as we know it.
Patricia, any thoughts?
I mean, right now, as it stands, I believe I read somewhere that 75% of the doses have been procured by 10 countries. So of the vaccine doses. So that is a staggering amount. And that kind of touches on what Dr. Kawama was mentioning, that our countries back home may not be able to afford that. I mean, they have other things that they are dealing with, and to procure the manufacturers of the vaccines hopefully will be able to do something so that not only the Western world is covered, but also globally, because at the end of the day, it is a global pandemic. And if one side, whether it's the Western hemisphere, is covered and the other side is not, at some point, the virus is just going to keep moving around and mutating and doing whatever it does, right? Because we are in a global community.
Right. Any thoughts? Any final thoughts on what people should expect? Any remarks on what people should think about as they go forward? At least as they go towards the spring and summer, how should they get ready for those seasons?
Yeah, I would say, I mean, yes, we are in a pandemic, but still try to maintain those public health measures that have been talked about already. And whether you get the vaccine or not, you should still maintain them, because we do not know how long the immunity is going to last. So it is still vital to keep doing that. And if you are considering a vaccine, make sure you look up the allergies, and also have an up-to-date list of your allergies for your provider. And also, if you aren't getting a vaccine, it's still important to maintain those public health measures, and just try to live a healthy life all around. It's still important. Just because we're in a pandemic, don't forget about your health. Don't forget about exercise, sleep. All of those things that we can do are still important. So yeah.
Dr. Kawama.
Yeah, I think going back to the topic of vaccine hesitancy, I think we have to think about this as both a personal responsibility and a community responsibility. A personal responsibility, you have to protect yourself and your family and loved ones. But you also have to recognize that for us to get out of the pandemic, we have to get at least 80% of the population vaccinated. And that will include even people who are less vulnerable to the pandemic, who are the younger people. You have to realize that even if you are young and healthy, if you don't get vaccinated, you are still a risk to the community and to other people. So when we talk about vaccine hesitancy, people need to, first of all, get the right information. Of course, we understand in communities of color, there's a history that has, has let people trust the system less. We have racism, we have disparities, but right now, let's try to get the right information. It's very clear that we're in this together because everyone is getting the vaccine, whether they are white, whether they are black, everyone is getting the vaccine, and healthcare providers. So we cannot use that as an excuse. And also, in order for life to go back to normal, to have schools open, for us to travel and do the things we all like to do, we have to think about the community responsibility, which means all of us getting vaccinated to make sure we develop that herd immunity, to protect ourselves, to make sure we at least contain the pandemic, to have schools reopened so we can travel, we can go to movie theaters, we can go to public places. That's the only way we're going to really get out of the pandemic. So I encourage people who still have skepticism about the vaccine, reach out to any of us if you have any questions. Reach out to healthcare providers in your community, ask them about the vaccine, ask them about any kind of risks that you have, so that you make the right decision. When it comes to pandemics, we are in this together. We're all tired of wearing face masks. There's no way we're going to get out of this quagmire without really working as a team. So it will take all of us, everyone, to be responsible, to make sure they get the vaccine when their time comes. That's the only way we're going to be able to get the necessary immunity to get rid of COVID-19.
And I think Mr. Mitala makes a good point when he says that everyone should get the vaccine now, while it is still free. Do you anticipate the governments forfeiting their responsibility to pay for this medication so that people have to actually buy it themselves, to go to the pharmacies and buy the medication themselves?
I don't think so. I think at least for the United States, taxpayers are putting a lot of money. I think the billions they are pumped into this vaccine is going to be free, at least for now. Until I think majority of the population is vaccinated, at least those who are willing to get the vaccine. But right now, when you look at the percentages, at least I don't know where Canada stands, but only about 56% of the people are willing to get the vaccine in the United States. So hopefully those numbers will continue to go up as people get, as more of their friends and community members start getting the vaccine. But for me, that's really my immediate concern, that a lot of vaccine has been ordered, but I guarantee that by May or June, July, the 56% will be maxed out. Then you will have doses sitting on the shelves, try to convince the other 30% that they should come and get the vaccine. So I think that's where we are heading. That's I don't know how it's going to play out, but that's really something which we should think about going forward.
56 is a D plus in a university. How are we measuring the response, acceptance response to the medication? What do we need to do? Well, what else do we need to do? Do we need more of these conversations?
I think so. I think we do. And I think people just need to have, like, it's great to have a forum like this where we can discuss this openly and in a healthy way. And people can type in their questions, because this is what we need. The more we talk about it, the more people are open to what the reputable sources are. And you can actually do your own research. And if you look at the reputable sources, they can tell you where the information is that we have so far. So as far as the studies, what we have so far, and as far as the risk factors, the benefits, so that you can make an educated decision. At the end of the day, it's still a personal choice for each and every individual, but with knowledge, there's power. So if you know what sites to look at, and then you can go into your physician's office, or these days everything is virtual. You can have that virtual interaction with your healthcare provider and really pick their brain and see whether it's a great fit for you. If you don't have any contraindications to the vaccine, then why not, right?
Right. So, final remarks, Mr. Dr. Kawama.
Oh yeah, I'd like to thank everyone who has tuned in tonight to share their views and questions. Again, I encourage all of you to reach out to us if you have any more questions. I'm always available online if you have questions you want to ask. Also, reach out to your healthcare providers, your family doctors, your pharmacists in your communities, just to make sure that they answer all your questions you have about the COVID-19 pandemic and the available vaccines and treatments. But as far as the hesitancy, yeah, that's something which is real. Even me, like I said, I got my vaccine, but I was nervous getting it. But I did my due diligence. I read about the vaccine. I read about the technology. I looked through the studies that have been conducted, and I made a conclusion that it's in my best interest as a healthcare provider who encounters sick people daily to get the vaccine, as well as the people around me, family, relatives, who I spend time with after coming from the pharmacy and interacting with all people who might be high risk or who have the disease. So we all have to make our decision, but again, like I said, it's a collective action. For us to be able to get rid of this pandemic, we have to develop some kind of community immunity. And the only way that's going to happen long term is through a vaccine. Getting the COVID disease itself is not going to offer you long-term immunity based on the available data. So you have to get 2 doses of the vaccines that are available, or 1 dose of the Johnson & Johnson vaccine to be able to protect yourself and your family and those around you. Thank you for having us today.
Thank you so much. Again, thank you so much for coming. This is the African Alumni Association. My name is Henry Sally, and we are very delighted to have had these 2 incredible pharmacists educating us today. Again, I want to thank both of you for your time and for coming to educate us. I think this is very important, and I think, as Patricia said, we need to have more of these conversations. Again, my name is Henry Sally for the African Alumni Association. It has been the conversation about COVID vaccine hesitancy. Is it justifiable? I think based on the questions and answers you have had, I think it's clear that there are some long-term effects that we do not know about yet regarding those vaccinations. But at the end of the day, it's more important for us to get vaccinated if we are thinking about going back to normal. I started this conversation by referring to Mr. Farid Zakaria's prediction that how we react, how we respond to the effects of COVID-19 or how we respond to everything that happens after will determine how we survive during the post-pandemic world. So again, I want to thank you. My name is Henry Sally for the African Alumni Association. See you soon.